Hemophilia is an X-linked trait. What does that mean? And how do I know it's an X-linked trait? What does it say right in the text? Those of you that did your homework? It's an X-linked disorder. And is it characterized by what? What's the kind of the thing that... So that means that you bleed a lot. People that have hemophilia bleed a lot. Okay, we talked about this earlier. I sent you a video as I promised you on Pedigrees. Did you watch it? Yes. On X-linked traits. Did you watch it? All right. Until recently, hemophilia was untreatable. Few hemophiliacs survived, and reproductive age because of small cut and internal hemorrhaging. So if someone that is a hemophiliac bumps into something, they could bleed to death. So they swell up as the blood leaves their veins and arteries, and they bleed into their abdominal cavities or their muscle cavities. They swell up and die. So they bleed to death internally. A small cut to you and I is a death sentence to someone with hemophilia. Okay, so it's a serious disease. And only recently in human history have we found drugs that help with clotting, so we can actually help reduce that impact. But even so, hemophiliacs have a real tough time of it. Yeah.
So people with hemophilia, what do they do to prevent themselves from getting cut?
They don't. They get cut. You can't. I mean, you can, obviously they're going to be a little more careful. They're not going to be boxers, right? If you're hemophiliac and you're a boxer, you're kind of, it's a death sentence, right? So it doesn't make sense. So there are some things that limit but we have drugs that help. Today we have drugs that help clot. It's still, even though I notice I said the word help, it's not a cure, right? But it's still an issue. And something else they talked about here, and this is obviously this is the reason you were assigned the case, but I thought it was an interesting case. Hemophilia affects males much more frequently than females. Hold.
Good morning.
Hemophilia has played an important role in Europe's history. For a sudden cropped up in children of Great Britain's Queen Victoria. Now, it cropped up in all the children that belonged to Queen Victoria. Now, Queen Victoria was, you've heard of the Victorian era? That was the era when Queen Victoria was queen. Elizabethan era was when Queen Elizabeth was the queen, the first Queen Elizabeth. It's the Queen Elizabeth, the one that's on the throne right now of England, is actually I think the granddaughter of Queen Victoria, great-granddaughter, I can't remember. All right, so it became, this hemophilia became known as a royal disease because it spread in the royal families of Europe, okay, through Victoria's descendants. So after Queen Victoria, all her children and her grandchildren, great-grandchildren started to have this disease. She had been worried about the quality of blood. Isn't that interesting how we phrase things? The quality of blood in the royal family. Which is another reason it surprises me that some people are upset that someone of African American descent is now going to be a royal family member. I would think they'd be happy to get some new genes in the gene pool. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense to me that we would have such serious hang-ups about that in a time when we obviously understand that you need a fresh infusion of genes in that gene pool. All right. It is doubtful in the time of writing a letter the Queen knew exactly what was going wrong. And you read this, yes? I don't have to read it for you. There was always the whisper about the curse of the Coburgs, right? There's always this idea of curse, because remember, they didn't understand genes. And you ask yourself, well, why is it my family? Why me? It's my family, my children, my children's children, the people that came before me. Must be a curse, must be God, right? Must be God's judgment on me. Does that make sense? It makes sense, right? For people that don't understand biology, that don't understand how mechanisms work, you would think, well, it's God is choosing that my family for some reason has done something that deserves this. Or we've been cursed by some evil. Some evil being has cursed us. Some jinn has come and given us someone's tried to make a wish with a jinn, and now we're in a horrible consequence of it. So that's the way that's the way we like to think, isn't it? And we laugh at that. Who laughs at that? Who thinks that the idea of a curse is evil spirits? Raise your hand if you think that's silly. Do you believe that's true? A lot of us think it's silly. I'll raise my hand. I would think that's silly. But then why do we read astrology pages? Yeah, well, some of you might think it's funny, but why do a lot of people read astrology pages? Why do people pay thousands of dollars to see fortune tellers? Because the idea of curses, the idea of jinns, the idea of it's still there. It's a reality in our psyche, right? Voodoo, santeria, witchcraft, curses, evil eye, right? We hear it in our grandmother's voices. We hear it in our families. We knock on wood. I'll admit, I knock on wood. All right, so you know what knocking on wood comes from? It comes from the idea of trying to scare away the evil spirits. All right? All right, so we laugh at some of these ideas, but honestly, it's not really that far off from the way we think today. All right, so let's take a look at Queen Victoria's family. So Queen Victoria did not have hemophilia. How do we know she was a carrier? Because people have... Oh, you don't have this? It didn't print?
We only got one. We only got 2 pages. 3, 5. Oh yeah, you skipped all the evens.
It skipped all the evens? Well, I guess we'll do it together today. I did read an email somebody sent me about it. Yeah.
I was going to say you can tell that she's a carrier because the carrier females only have color.
Right. So here you have a key, and it tells you carrier female. That's easy. So you're right. In this chart, you know she's a carrier. But how did they know to fill this in? God didn't send down this chart from heaven, right? Someone made this chart. Someone sat there and drew this out, right? How did they draw it out, is my question. Does that make sense to you? Like you have a chart in front of you. You're right. The fact that it's half filled in means she's a carrier. Correct. But when this was some human being sat down and made this chart, how did they know that she was a carrier? Yeah.
Because if she didn't have it and he didn't have it, wasn't be no way that they would pass it on to their offspring.
That's right. So if she didn't have the gene, then there's no way that her grandchild could get it. And how do we know that her male grandchild didn't get it from his father? Yeah. Because the male passes the Y. So he got it from his mom. So she had it. How do we know she didn't get it from dad? She could have. Albert could have given it to her. How do we know that Albert didn't give it to her? Well, he gave her a gene. He gave her an X. That's what made her a girl. If he would have gave her the Y, then she would have been a boy. And look at this. What are they to each other? Brother and sister. So they did. They got married. They had babies. This is what I'm telling you. I've said this. I don't know why there's this shock. I've said this is why. That's why I said the whole point about they should be happy that they got an African American lady in the gene pool now, because you need to mix up this gene pool. You've had a lot of inbreeding. This is no good genetically, right? Brother or sister getting married is not a good thing. What's this here? What about this? What is this? Not siblings. Pay attention. And shush now. It is not pleasant to think about, but it is a reality that these two, Louis of Hesse and Alice, were brother and sister, and they got married and they had kids. They had many kids. Now, one of the ways that we know that Albert probably didn't have the gene is we know his Albert's family lineage as well. Nobody had the disease in Albert's family, and we also know that we also know that only that one of this boy here, you see this boy here, he has the disease. So there again, who do we know he got it from? The Victoria. So we know Victoria's a carrier because of this boy mainly, right? As soon as she had a boy with it, since we know it's X-linked, we know it had to come from Victoria, right? For the boy. The girl, it could have came from boy, father, or mother, but we know Albert's family, by the way, did not have this run in his family. Victoria did, and now we have all this evidence here. Now, you can see that the inbreeding caused the issue here because, not just because of increasing the chances of getting a child with the hemophilia gene on the X chromosome, but because of other genes as well. And this is just one of the many recessive diseases that could crop up whenever you have inbreeding. When you're talking about X-linked, the thing is that the X-linked trait is almost 10,000 times more likely for a boy to get it than a girl. Imagine that number. 10,000 times. Not 100 times, not 10 times, but 10,000 times more likely for you to get the disease if it's X-linked, if you're a male than a female. Because of what I already described to you about how you get an X-linked trait. Yeah.
So if they wasn't inbreeding, it would be less like pop-ups of the disorder?
It would be less likely, right? Now, the problem is that that's not true for X-linked traits in this case. As soon as somebody has an X-linked disease, this particular one, then the boys are more likely to get it than girls, and that's it. As long as that gene stays in the... But imagine that this boy dies, doesn't have babies, because he did, right? This boy died, didn't have... This one died, but was able to have a child and pass it on. Usually, look what happens usually. What happens to them? They die before they have babies. Does that make sense? So because they died before they had babies, that gene would leave the population. You see how it's not in this side of the family at all. Does that make sense? That's because when the poor child who got it, her boys died. The boy that didn't have the gene, he may or may not, doesn't look like he had kids either, but if he would have had kids, then he would not have passed on the gene after that. So a disease like hemophilia, assuming you don't keep the child alive long enough to have babies, that's the key. It's going to be the key to evolution, which is our next unit, right? Evolution. The key is, do you send your genes to the next generation or not? That's it. That's all evolution cares about. Do you live long enough to send your genes to the next generation? So these guys did not, for whatever reason, have children, so their genes did not go on to the next generation. Neither did these. This one did. She's a carrier, so she can, and she did. 2 of her children died before giving birth. This lady had a child, also died before giving birth. We don't know if this boy had it or not. I don't know why we don't know. Maybe it died at birth and they didn't do a blood test. This person died without having children, a child of a carrier. Another carrier had these 2 boys that died. This child died, was also the child of a carrier. It's a lot of dead babies, all right? When I say dead babies, they could have been adults when they died, right? we assume these are not carriers, these are normal females. I'm assuming they know this because of either blood tests or DNA tests, or they had children and they're not listed here. It's the only way you know, right? How would you know if this person has a gene or not? How do you know if this person's a carrier or not? How do you know someone is a carrier or of a gene or not? Yeah.
Their shape will be filled in halfway.
That's how you read the chart. But how do you know whether to fill it in? How do you know whether to fill in the chart halfway or not?
If their kid has it.
If their kids have it, that's it. Now, she's right. Blood work would have been it. DNA test, blood work is another way. But some kind of test, and in general, you're absolutely right. That's it. You look to see about a cross. You cross them. You wait to see what happens with the babies. If one of the babies has hemophilia, she's a carrier. If the babies don't have hemophilia, as far as we know, she's normal. That's how it used to be done. Today we have blood tests. We can check DNA. Back here, they didn't even know about DNA. Around here, they knew about DNA, but they weren't able to test for genes. Now here, we can test for genes. So we know that these guys don't have the gene. All right. Now remember, we're only talking about one disease. There's many diseases that are recessive. Now with recessive genes that are not X-linked, now there is definitely, this inbreeding would definitely be an issue. Okay. This X-linked trait, the problem is that the female's a carrier. If she marries a male with the disease, now you have a chance to have a female with the disease as well. That's by the way, that's why it's 10,000 times likelier to have the disease if you're a male than a female, because usually the males die before they can have babies, especially back before we had treatments. And certainly, if you're a carrier, you're only probably going to marry a male that doesn't have the disease. This is only because this disease is deadly. There are many forms of, for instance, there's dwarfisms that are X-linked. There are all kinds of other characters or traits that are X-linked that won't kill you, that won't impact your ability to have babies. So they can crop up in females, but it's always going to be more likely in males. Does that make sense? Because of the pure genetics of it. Everybody all right with this? We understand this because you're going to have a question on X-linked traits tomorrow. All right.
Wait, there's one of those.
Yeah.
Can you explain one more time so I can write it down, the definition of an X-linked trait?
Did you watch the video I sent you?
I most definitely did.
Okay, so X-linked trait is a gene that's on the X chromosome. So I'm going to put little h for hemophilia on the X chromosome. You see that's the X, the gene is there on the X chromosome. Everybody okay with that?
Okay.
All right. Then you can have an X without the H, that's not hemophilia. Now the normal gene. So you have the normal. Now what are the possible combinations? If you're a female, you have two of them. If you're a carrier, you have one X and one X big H, one X little h, right? If you're a male, you have a Y. Does the Y have the hemophilia gene on it? No, by definition, the Y is a different chromosome, has different genes on it. That is the one exception of all the chromosomes we have. Whether you're male or female in this room, every chromosome you have has the same genes as the person that's sitting next to you. The difference between the two of you is the version of the gene, the allele. Do you understand that? So you have X gene 135 on your chromosome number 20. The person sitting next to you has that gene number on chromosome number 20 as well. in exactly the same position. The one exception to that rule is this XY business. The Y chromosome is completely different from the X. There's total different set of genes on the Y that are not found on the X, and there are genes on the X that are not found on the Y. Is that clear? That's what makes males and females different. The X chromosomes, though, males do share our X chromosomes with our females. So the females and males, right, the human males, human females, share all the genes on the X chromosomes. Every gene that a female has on the X chromosome, the male has it. A woman makes estrogen, a man makes estrogen. A woman makes testosterone, a man makes testosterone. So the genes on the X chromosomes are the same for male and female. The difference is the Y chromosomes can be, that has some genes that the X doesn't, and doesn't have the genes that are on the X chromosome. So if a male has this Y, this combination, then the male is normal, not hemophilia. If the male has this combination, the male is hemophilia. The difference is the female can have this. She can be a carrier. The male can never be a carrier. If they have the gene, they show it. Because they don't need two small copies. They only need one small copy. Because there's no big copy, no dominant copy to hide it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So a male can never be a carrier in this case?
A male can never be a carrier in any X-linked trait. Is that clear? Because a male, there is no carrier for anything on the X for a male because the male only has one X chromosome. Does everybody understand the question he asked?
Yes.
And we're good with this? We understand this concept? So you can understand that if you're a male, why you have double the chance, and more than double, 10,000 times. You can understand that why in nature something like hemophilia is so deadly, 10,000 times more likely to be a male with it than a female. Because not only do you have the genetic, the possibilities, because if you do a cross with just a male, a female, and a male that doesn't have it, and you do the cross, what do you get? I get normal here, right? X big H, X big H. Here you get normal, X big H, X little h. Right? And so there's 100% normal. Yeah, she's a carrier, right? Normal with a carrier. But she's not hemophilia. Her phenotype would be normal. You're right, she would genetically be a carrier. But her phenotypically, she would not show hemophilia. Here, this male would have normal, not a carrier. And what does this person have? Hemophilia, and it can't be a carrier, it's just his hemophilia. This is definitely hemophilia. So you have 50% of the children, male children, 50% of the male children for a female carrier are going to have the disease. 0% of the female children will have the disease. So when is it possible what's the only way you're going to be able to get a female with the disease? It's the only way. If the male also has the disease. If the female is a carrier or has the disease, and the male also has the disease, now you got 50-50. But still, even so, it's still normal, carrier, and what? Disease, hemophilia. Let's just put hemo. Here you have normal, not a carrier, obviously, because it's a male. And then here you have hemo. So there's still only equal chances. Does that make sense? Yes? And if the woman it has the disease and the male has the disease, now everybody have 100% disease, don't you?
Yeah.
Now there are no carriers. There is no one, everybody has hemo. 100% of the kids have hemo because that's the only gene they got to give. And so that should make sense to everybody. So those are the three options you have when you're talking about these genes, yeah?
Why would you put that bottom row on the Punnett square? I thought you said you don't use the Y when doing X-inactivation.
You still give the Y. It's just not on, the gene is not on it, right? There's no gene on it, but you're still getting the Y. And I always put both rows because even though you don't have, you notice that this, if you didn't have this row, you wouldn't show the Y disease at all. See, you still get the Y, you still get the X. You could say, just leave the Y off. Okay, we could do that, right? But you still need that row. Yeah.
So when they ask the probability based on gender, do you do it out of 2 or do you do it out of all the offspring at all?
I don't understand your question, I'm sorry.
Because like the question asks like,
Which question?
A, the number 1.
All right, so let's take a look at age number 1. That's where I want to get to, is these questions. So first let's take a look at Queen Victoria's son Leopold's family in figure 2. So there it is. His daughter Alice, Leopold, his daughter Alice here, Athlon had one hemophilic son, so that meant she was a carrier, right? Because her father was not hemophiliac. His father was not hemophiliac, and it wouldn't matter because the son got his X from mom. So the fact that he's hemophiliac, right, means mom's a carrier, right? And we knew Leopold did have hemophilia. Yes? So the fact that this is obvious, is it not to you? If it's not obvious, now's the time to say, hey, I don't see that. Okay. His daughter, okay, so a little boy whose status is unknown, so they had a little boy, we don't know what the status was. What is the probability that her son was a hemophiliac? What's the probability that this person was a hemophiliac? We don't know if he's hemophiliac because he might have died at childbirth. He might have died before he had baby, before he got too old, before any symptoms showed up. But what is can we stop texting in class? What are the probability that son was hemophiliac?
50%.
Nope. So what does this show me? This shows me you don't understand. If you understood, you'd know the answer. What are the odds that this son is a hemophiliac? Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say? 50%. So it's correct. Sorry. How do you? Oh, wait a minute. That's not true. It is 50% for this son. Yes, it's 50%. How did she say? Why did she say when she said 50%? Why is it 50%? Because this son got what from dad? From this father, he got a Y. And what did he get from mom? And so what are the two X's that she has? She's a carrier. See, big H, and the other one was what? So what are the odds that he got an X with a little h?
50%.
All right. So you're talking while I'm talking. You're laughing and giggling and talking to each other. I'm assuming you understand. Yes? Because you're having a conversation. You didn't answer a minute ago when I asked a question. But when I'm trying to have a conversation and explain it, you're having a conversation. So I can only assume that you have this. We'll find out tomorrow. But I can only assume at this point that you have it. So 50% chance, yes? All right.
Wait,
So the next question, your question was about B or C?
No, I was saying when you find out the probability, do you do it out of the 2 offspring that's males, or do you do it out of all offspring? Just like how you did that Punnett square on the side.
You just do a Punnett square. Each probability is dependent on the parents, not the offspring. So you don't have to say 1 out of the 3 kids. See, they had 3 kids. You don't say 1 out of 3 kids are probably going to have it. No. What are the probabilities? You do a Punnett square. That's what a Punnett square is. It's the probabilities. That's what you're doing. Are we clear on that? Yes, I could. You should be able to do it easily. So the male is X big H, right? How do I know that? Because the male has is not diseased. The female, and of course he's Y. The female is X big H, X little h. Yes? If I do the Punnett square, and everybody should be able to do it, I don't know why anyone's not able to do it. What's the only person in here that has the disease? 1/4 of the you expect that this cross is going to give you 1/4 of 1 out of 4 kids is going to have the probability of these two getting married, having a child with hemophilia is 1/4 of the whole population. Now, what percentage of the girls are going to have it?
That's
0. Right. That's your question. Then now 1/4 of the whole population are going to have it, but if you want to break it down, it's 0%. 0% females are from this cross, right? Does everybody agree? Are going to have hemophilia. And 50% of the males are going to have it. But 1/4 of the whole population. Does that make sense? But realistically, you're going to see a larger percentage of males having it than the females. Why? Because it's X-linked.
And they said the girls can't have like 1X. If 1 works, then they do it.
That's right, because you have one. We call it lionization, but we can talk about that. We'll talk about that later. You just have what you're doing is a dominant recessive. You have the dominant showing up, and the recessive isn't showing up. But also, there's another thing that goes on with the X chromosomes. It's a little more complicated. Girls in this room, you shut down randomly one of your X chromosomes all over your body. So every cell of your body has one of the 2 X's shut down. You can't have more than 1 X on without having some serious issues. You produce too much proteins. We'll talk about that later. But it's called lionization. It's called X-inactivation. You make one of your 2 X's inactive. Obviously, you only need 1 X to survive, right? How do we know that you only need 1 X to survive? To be normal, to live, and function. Boys are your evidence. So what happens when you have too many chromosomes?
Down syndrome?
Is one example. You have disease, right? Too many chromosomes lead to disease. Down syndrome is exactly right. It's a perfect example. Instead of 2 chromosome number 21s, what do you have? 3. It's called trisomy 21. You have 3 copies. 1 extra chromosome number 21 gives you Down syndrome. If both your X's, if you had an extra X, you'd have a problem. I don't know what you'd get, but I can tell you triple X is, I believe, Klinefelter syndrome. You have to look that up. But the bottom line is, an extra chromosome would be a problem. So what do women do? What do our females do? Shut one of them down. Turn off one of the chromosomes.
How does our body know to turn?
Randomly. It's random. It's just flips a coin. So in some of the cells, you're going to produce the gene for little h. In the other cells, you produce the big H. But because it's random, you have 1 trillion cells. You have a lot of cells. You have the random distribution means that most females that have that little H gene are not going to show hemophilia, right? Because you have half your genes are producing that BH. Yeah.
So it's not always the same X is shut off in our cells?
No,
Okay.
it's random. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about cell differentiation. Yeah.
I was saying, what if they had 5 kids and it's
It's 1/4 chance. So 0.25 times the number of, so you have 1/4 chance, 1 out of 4. Could you have all 5 have hemophilia? Sure. Could you have 5 boys and all of them have hemophilia? Okay, yeah. Could you have 10? Yeah. But every one, there's less and less of a chance of it happening, and distributed over a large population is going to be 50%. All right. What is the probability of both of these boys being normal? Now there's a rule, a mathematical rule when you're talking about probabilities. There's 2 rules. There's a sum rule and the product rule. And I really don't want to get into it right now because the test is tomorrow. All right. But if you want to know the probabilities of what are the chances of both these kids having, you either have to multiply or you have to add, depending on what the relationship is between the 2 separate events. I don't want to talk about it right now, okay? But the bottom line is, individually, you got a 50% chance. Yes? We agree?
You were about to say something like the percent chance times something.
Yeah, there's two rules in math, right? It's called the product rule and probability. Do you really want to get into this?
No.
Because we can. It is useful. Yeah.
basically like in that thing that you had us read, it just said when it's saying this and this will happen, it's saying use the product. When it says this or this will happen, use the sum.
That's right. So let's go ahead and talk about it since they talked about it in the reading. So you have the product rule and you have the sum rule. Right? So somebody tell me what they think the product rule is.
How many is produced?
What's the product rule?
Multiply the probability.
So yes, you're multiplying the probability, but when do you do it?
Are you talking to me?
Anybody?
Oh.
Somebody tell me, when do you use the product
How
rule?
can you get the percent?
When it says.
Obviously, I hope you see that the product rule you're multiplying and the sum rule you're adding. Yes?
Yeah.
All right, that's easy. Go ahead.
When it says what the probability of getting this and that.
So if I tell you, what are the chances of getting, of this boy having the disease and this boy having the disease, what's going to be that probability? The product, which is what? All right, I'm putting this on a test to help you motivate you, so listen. It's easy, but I didn't want to get into it, but we have time, so let's go ahead. What is it?
1/2 times
1/2 times 1/2. 0.5 times 0.5, which is what? 0.25. So there's a 1/4 chance of both these boys having the disease. And every time I say, what are the odds of my next boy having it? And the next one, if I have 5 boys, what are the chances that all of them have this disease? It would be 0.25 times 0.25 times 0.25. Could it be? Yes, but it becomes more and more unlikely every event if it's random. Yes? Okay. So now what if I ask you what is the odds of this boy having it or this boy having it? So what do I do? It's the same Punnett square, so each of them has 0.5. So what do? Add them. I add 1/4 plus 1/4, which equals what? 50-50 chance that one or the other one's going to have it. Now you can imagine if you have 5 kids, 5 boys instead of 2, right? There'd be 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4, which is what? 5 quarters, or 1 1/4, right? So odds are you're going to have a baby with it, right? The more you have, you see, this is or, this is and you'll have those problems on tomorrow's test. Tomorrow you're going to have pedigrees, chi-square, dihybrid crosses, probabilities, know your 9 to 3 to 3 to 1 ratios, the stuff we've covered. Yes? Good luck. Good luck. You're going to have problem sets. You're going to have to figure things out. Did everybody hear me? You're going to have problem sets. You have to figure things out. You heard that, yeah?